You're listening to Artistic Finance, show 197. On today's show, we talk with choreographer Staś Kmieć about how he's handled the business side of his theater and dance career. We discuss tax filing, healthcare, and not spending money when on tour. Now, just to note, we do talk a lot about theater and dance because Staś and I have worked together, and that's just how the conversation went. I was curious about his background and career, so if you want to jump to the finance part of the conversation, skip ahead to about minute 30. This is the last of our artistic finance interviews that we recorded before our 6-month hiatus. So it was several months ago. I mentioned that Heathers off-Broadway was extended to this January, but since then it has been extended again until May 24th, 2026. So congratulations to everybody involved in that. I also do want to mention a couple things about the general state of theater in the United States. So last week, Brad Gray had mentioned Williamstown Theater Festival. Well, this week they announced that they are canceling their 2026 season entirely, and they're going to be putting on productions every other year. And then the Met Opera in New York, they laid off 22 administrative staff, citing similar reasons that money is hard to come by these days. And that is just reminders that the performing arts are up against a lot of headwinds, and the fact that so many theaters can survive is sort of a miracle, and I have so much respect for the leadership at nearly any theater company that is able to, survive. On the individual level, here we are 5 years post-COVID, and as workers in the industry, we are still talking about rebuilding careers. Brad Gray discussed it last week, Staś discusses it this week, and note that I don't ever ask questions about COVID. The topic just rears its head because it was such a trauma for everybody in the live events world. So I know if we're discussing it, that you, the listener, also have it in your memory and that you are rebuilding your career too. And so I say unto you, good work. You are doing great. You are still here. And I am thrilled about that. And I respect you for keeping it going. So here's to 2026 being a year that goes wildly well for all of us. And the last thing I want to mention before we get to the interview, and forgive me for bringing this up because I am generally a positive person, but I just want listeners in the future to have context of the time and the place that we record this stuff. So this weekend, on the streets of Minnesota, a 37-year-old by the name of Alex Preddy was publicly executed by the government of the United States without a trial. And that video was shown on the news and everybody has seen it. And so it's just messing with my brain. And intellectually, I know that the United States is safer than Ukraine, which is at war right now, or Gaza, or North Korea. I know that. But in the past 3 weeks, the US government has done some crazy things, like shooting a defenseless 37-year-old Renee Good after she dropped her kid at daycare. They tear gassed a 6-month-old baby. The baby thankfully survived after getting CPR, but then the government took a 5-year-old boy into custody because they were kidnapping his dad. And then I guess that was better than what they did in New Jersey, which was abandon a 6-year-old girl after they kidnapped her dad. So thankfully that 6-year-old was found by people after she ran down the street. But my goodness. So I just have to say it, it seems crazy for this all to be going on and not say anything. Maybe this is hitting me a little hard because the two people that have been killed were 37 years old and I'm 37 years old. But I also think that this is sort of a moment of fear for so many people in the United States, and myself included. So I don't know if it's just me, but this moment feels so much like we're on the cusp of a second civil war, and we're all holding it together, but there's this ruthless government, which is a semi-dictatorship, and it just feels like any day I'm going to have to enlist in the USA Union Army and go to the front lines against a Confederate army. And obviously, we all hope that doesn't happen, and maybe it's just me, But if you listen to this in the future, that is just what I'm feeling. And maybe another reason it's on my mind is that on today's show, we talk about Fiddler on the Roof a lot. And if you know that story, you already know how incredibly relevant it is to what's going on, because the central character, Tevye, battles with morality, right and wrong, unjust government control, including a government that's terrorizing and killing. And then how all of that fits into his personal beliefs, like his ties to society's traditions, and when he cuts off his own family for the sake of those traditions, or his breaking point where he breaks from tradition for the sake of his family. And that show has a tragic ending. The government wins and it exiles the entire community from their homes. And that ending is that Tevye's whole family begins their exile walk. Now, in a great sort of irony for this moment is that the story does end with the tiniest sliver of hope that their lives are all going to be improved as they move to their new safe haven, which is the United States of America. So let us hope that that little sliver of hope becomes reality and that America can be that new start again for people, and that this current dark time where citizens are getting killed just gets put behind us. Let's hope. All right, but let us forget about all that seriousness and let us get to our interview, which is serious in its own way because we are talking about how we sustain careers as freelancers in theater, in dance. You can find links to everything we discuss, such as the VITA tax forms, in the show notes, which are at artisticfinance.com/197. Without further ado, let's get to the show.
You are listening to Artistic Finance, where we help creatives learn about the business of show business.
Welcome and thank you for listening. I am your host, Ethan Steimel, broadcasting from Lake St. Louis, Missouri. We are recording this July 1st, 2025, and the news today is that the Republican-controlled U.S. Senate is trying to pass a new budget that I'll just say is going to increase the deficit by $3.3 trillion, and at the same time, it's going to cut government spending, specifically on welfare and healthcare things, by $1.2 trillion. So we'll see what happens there. There's another very American story that is pretty sober, which is combining guns and mental health. And that is a 20-year-old person in Idaho set a fire so that firefighters would come out, and then he opened fire on them and he killed 2 of them. So our hearts go out to the people who are affected by that. And then on a lighter note, in New York, off Broadway, Heathers is playing at New World Stages, and they just extended their run to January 25th, 2026. And previously they were planning to close on September 28th. And that is a West End production that transferred over here. I'm always impressed whenever I see an extension, but the more I know about life, it's like the extensions are already built into the run. And it's like a marketing thing where they then just announce that they've extended. So I don't know if this is a real extension or if they probably had planned this all along. But either way, congratulations to everybody involved in that show. So that's where we are at this moment in history. And today we welcome to the show director and choreographer Staś Kmieć. Welcome, Staś.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. It's good to see you again, even though not in person.
Not in person, exactly. Are you in New York now?
I'm in New York. I'm upstate right now, but I'm going into the city tomorrow.
It's always hard to keep track of theater people because they're all, who knows where they are at any given time.
I'm back now and probably working pretty much like here for the summer. So working on things.
All right, Staś, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, as you said, I'm a director choreographer. I'm a dancer, or maybe rather former dancer. I still do some dancing. Actor, instructor, lecturer, writer. All those things have progressed me along. It's been interesting because many times I've been told, you just have to focus on one thing, just ballet. My career would be over with that. And, luckily I've been doing a lot of things simultaneously, which we talked about before. That's for me, that worked really well. And that's something I do advise to many people. I've performed at the Metropolitan Opera throughout Europe with Rudolf Nureyev on tours of Fiddler, which we might talk about a little bit later. But simultaneously, I've always been directing and choreographing. Now I can definitely put a light on that and do more of it. I think we'll talk along the way about the other little successes, and there have been successes and there have been troublesome projects, things that don't come to light. And as you know, COVID, that did a nice little thing on a lot of projects. And so it's kind of rebuilding. And I think that's one of the things we all do in this business is to build and then rebuild.
Yeah, and I was looking at your bio before this, and I saw that you're in a lot of unions. Can you just say what unions you're a part of?
Okay. Well, the Society of Stage Directors and Choreographers, SDC, Actors Equity, Screen Actors Guild, AFTRA, and then I'm on honorable withdrawal from the American Guild of Musical Artists. That was for ballet and opera, and kind of those days I don't think are going to happen. So I'm honorable withdrawal from that one. Still paying those dues. That's money, I'll tell you. That's that and working dues, but
So you're paying dues on three of them and not the fourth one?
correct, correct.
Amazing. Yeah, I saw that because I'm USA 829. That's my only union. And sometimes I get into IATSE, but I don't pay dues necessarily. So I just saw three unions and I was like, ooh, that's a lot.
Yeah, and then there's the working dues that happen when you work. So, that's always fun.
I know that's always a bittersweet pill because it's like, look at all that money. And then it's like, well, but I did work. So that's good. All right, Stash, I also want to mention that we met working on the Yiddish Fiddler that was downtown at the museum, and then it went off Broadway to Stage 42, and then it went off Broadway again to New World Stages. I'm going to get to the questions that I ask everybody, but before we do that, can you just talk about your relationship with Fiddler and or Yiddish Fiddler if you want? But Yiddish Fiddler is not the only version of Fiddler you've ever worked on.
It is not. As a performer, I performed in 1,682 performances of Fiddler on the Roof, not counting. And then I assisted my mentor of Fiddler, that responsibility was handed to him from Jerome Robbins. That has now since been handed over to me. So I'm the keeper of the flame. That used to mean a whole lot more when a certain lawyer that was in the Robbins Foundation was there. And she made sure that a Broadway production or any major venue like St. Louis Muni, the larger venues, or also abroad, had to do the Robbins choreography. So it was built in that he would go and do that. Now, with the last two revivals, they're not so good with that. So it's kind of bittersweet for me as well. I have a lot of knowledge, and we're talking about a book. So if there are any publishers out there, there's a book about the making of Fiddler on the Roof, which would include Yiddish Fiddler on the Roof as well. So anyways, when Yiddish Fiddler on the Roof came about, someone told me about it. They read about it, and I got in touch with them immediately and said, I know the show. I'd like to direct and choreograph it. And they said, well, hold on a second. And there were crickets. So I waited and waited and waited. And finally they said, well, we have Joel Gray on board. Can you meet with him tomorrow? I think it was like tomorrow. I was like, oh, okay. The way it got handed over to me was that my mentor was not well enough to do it. And he said, the person you need to get is me. Which is great, and since then I've taken on the reins of that. So it was an interesting situation on working on Yiddish Fiddler because I'd been so used to doing the Robbins version with letting it grow within that version, but staying very true to that version. pretty much with this one, they wanted to make changes. One of them, big one, was the set, which was basically no set. And Fiddler on the Roof with no roof. And so I was basically given IKEA furniture to kind of move around. When I was working with Joel, I had conversations with him and Robbins Foundation, and they told me, we trust you, you know this work, you will know the integrity of the work and stay true to it, and we give you our blessing, which then opened it for me to do other productions in that vein. So I always say that I do the choreography that Robbins, within his style and intent, but the choreography that he would have done if he had more time out of town. There were a lot of different things that came out of that. And Joel is an actor's director. So he really was more about talking with the actors and finding out their characters, their relationships, and all that. And at first it was unbeknownst to me that I was going to handle everything physical. The set changes, the many concepts, as well as all the blocking and the musical staging and the choreography. So there was a lot on my plate with that. And then as we had a lot of meeting together, I ran the tech rehearsals. It's something that I had studied when I was at Tufts University Tech Theater, and that was something that I could do. So I handled those as well, and that was, I don't know, it was just so natural because I'm used to dealing with designers and speaking within their language. And although there's been a lot of updates in lighting in particular, but so it was very rewarding to do that. So I would say that Joel was the mind and I was the body. Anything physical was me. So that's that.
Yeah. All right. So you said you were in 1,000 productions. Where were those all different productions, and was it the same choreography? Like, was it the same show?
It was basically the same show. There were a couple that kind of strayed, but the choreography was pretty much the same. There were two-year tours. Those were production contract national tours back in the day when there was those production contracts. And then there was a 5-year break, and then there were another two. But within that time, I would get phone calls, and the director Sammy Dallas Bayes would want to know, are you in shape? Are you still dancing? Can you do the stuff still? And why don't you go with us to St. Louis Muni? I'm taking dancers and certain principal characters, and so it makes it easier for them as well. People have Cats is their show that they do everywhere, or a chorus line. Fiddler happened to be mine. Fiddler now and forever, so.
That's amazing. And actually, just because I'm 37, so I'm not like old, but I'm slowly aging gracefully. And I feel like it's important to me now about mentors and our lineage in sort of theater and how we got to where we are. So you mentioned Sammy Dallas Bayes as your mentor. Can you just talk about that relationship?
I always had my eyes and ears open. And when he gave a correction to Yenta, I absorbed that correction. So I had a good understanding of the show. I read a lot as well. The real thing that happened for me was when Fiddler was going out with Topol's final tour, and I was not on that tour. It was a set agreement, the CETA contracts, and it was low money, and I had asked to be the dance captain. I wasn't given it, and politics get involved in along that way, and I didn't do it. But everyone was jumping off that tour, and Sammy needed an assistant here in New York. I was his assistant, and basically I would teach all the dancing and then present it to him and then sit in on all those auditions he had for everyone else. And then we started having the conversations. We'd go out to lunch, we'd talk, he'd talk about Fiddler and all that. And then he was also amazed because I read so much about Fiddler on all those tours. I was on eBay getting not only any books that were involved there, but also programs. He realized that I really know this and is someone so in those conversations, which we continued after those tours and through my Yiddish fiddler and after Yiddish fiddler, I went to, visit him and, he brought out the books and it was, there was just so much more information that you even could get than you could get in a book. He introduced me to some of the original cast members who were still alive. We, in fact, met all at a Jewish deli in Philadelphia. It's part of what Fiddler is. Fiddler is tradition, but it's tradition in the people that it was passed down through, how it lived and grew. What people don't realize, and this is something that I got to speak with Jerome Robbins before I was even cast in Fiddlers. And he said that it's a living, breathing piece of theater and that it should grow in that way. And so, where many people feel we need to do an exact cookie cutter, by the number, version of something, it needs to be within that framework, but it needs to grow. So, those kinds of conversations, work for me. With Sammy, I had some other mentors in the ballet world, which I remember fondly. And I've now passed it on where I have an assistant, James Stefko, who is, I try to pass him, I hand him books like, opening night present, here's a book. Here's a book that you can't really find. And then there have been other people that when I was at Ballet Western Reserve as their artistic director, there were students, but there were also some alumni that would get in touch with me. I've written letters of recommendations to universities. So, there was someone who went to Northwestern from that. And I always told them that if there's something right for them, I can crack open the door, but they're the ones who have to open it fully. I'm not going to give a person a job just because, they have to be worthy of it, but I can get them into that audition and two of them really, did it and they got the parts. So I'm pleased with that. And even there's someone who I'll be seeing in a couple of weeks. She's before going to Scotland. She's performing at 59 East 59. I'm going to see her in that performance because I just want to see where she is now. And, we'll have a conversation and, she'll be on my radar, when casting or whatever comes along.
Wow, I love that. Thank you for saying all that. I just also picked up that I thought maybe you stumbled into the fiddler thing, which you did, but also you were obsessed with it. You went a little overboard with research and stuff.
I did. I have 2 degrees. One's from Tufts University. It's a drama and psychology degree. And then I'm a crazy person, as as I told you, diversify and all that. I've always had a love for folk dance. And so a second degree from a university in Poland. And that's in ethnography and folk studies, which included dance and all that, and dance and song and architecture and costume and all that fun stuff, which comes nicely in with Fiddler because I can work with costume designers and I know what it should be and what it shouldn't be. I also took it upon myself because it was during the communist era to go to a synagogue, talk with a rabbi, and do a second set of study in Jewish Polish culture. And so I already came with a lot of that to begin with. And I imbue my fiddlers with that. So I give it even, Jerome Robbins did an incredible job and with consultation of a rabbi and his wife and attended weddings in Williamsburg. But there's more. And so I added even more to it. And it is noticed by, your Jewish population or even I know Hasidic women really enjoyed that I have the women dancing in the wedding when it used to be only the men. Only the men would dance. And they said, of course we would dance at a wedding. It's a wedding. We'd be dancing on our side. We dance. So for me, it just enlivens and is that tradition, and it's true to form. It's true to what Jerome Robbins' intentions were.
This also makes sense about you knowing about the culture because I do remember there was no set on the Yiddish version. And in the first production, there was one moment, I just remember this, but we were trying to expedite like entrances and exits or something. And you kept saying they have to touch the door. Even though there is no door, they have to touch the door because culturally, etc., it's wrong if you don't do that. And that was like a big thing. You were like, we have to do that, even though there's no door.
There's a mezuzah, and that has very miniature scrolls in it, and you always you touch it and you kiss, and that's on entering or exiting, and it is part of it. And it's amazing to me that there were Broadway revivals that totally took that out, and they had sets. But I asked Beowulf for it. I said, "Can we?" Because we had no fly space, no wings, nothing. I mean, it was really. And I asked him, can we just have like just a frame? Nope, can't even have that. Can't even have that. I go, well, okay, I'm gonna tape a little line, and when people cross it, that's where the door's gonna be. And I put my hand up, and that's the height they needed to get. And it was noticed. And by the way, I had flack by many people about that in rehearsals. But what does the Jewish forward, or the tablet pick up? They pick up that because it made it very authentic.
Yeah, which I think was doubly important, having it be in Yiddish and having that audience that's going to come see that.
Yeah, and that one was an interesting one, was because there was no set and the costumes were also very low key and representational. Like I said, they're kind of like, the Gap Banana Republic kind of costumes. You needed to show your authenticity not only in the customs and the rituals, but and the dancing, but also the framework and those relationships that Joel worked on in the mind had to be there in the body as well. Because yes, there were super titles and people could read them, and many people know Fiddler, but how do you convey the story without the language that everyone is accustomed to? So there was that aspect as well. And I know we're talking a lot about Fiddler.
We will, in just a moment, we will get to our regularly scheduled questions. But one more, I know you as a director choreographer, but obviously you were a performer, a dancer. How did you switch from dancing to then going into choreography and directing?
Well, oddly enough, it was in my being at a very early age. At age 8, when I started taking dance lessons, I choreographed and directed all the kids to do a little presentation with songs and skits and all that for my teacher's birthday. And she was like really taken aback. And I kept in touch with her. She's no longer living, but I kept in touch with her for a very long time. And I told her that, and she said, she just was like, who is this kid? He's 8 years old and he's like, doing all this stuff. So it was always in me. So I kind of balanced it out. Yes, I was dancing, but I would be choreographing somewhere, or and crazy. I mean, like when I was at Boston Ballet summer program initially, I was choreographing a production of Once Upon a Mattress. So I always balanced the two of them, directing and choreographing, or just choreographing. And as time went on, I think with many choreographers, and then I think of Fosse, I think of Jerome Robbins, that you work with directors and they're not quite. There's either you're on the same page and you can finish each other's sentences, or not. And that's the problem when the or not is there. And so a lot of the vision, and particularly because many choreographers are visionary and sometimes are left to do everything, and that's happened with me, you want to direct and choreograph. And because I also studied, not only acting and I did everything. I studied directing at Tufts. We had tech theater where you sold your soul to the drama department and built sets. And then, your last project was to do the model and have the drawings and do the costume renderings and the lighting plot and all that. I mean, I did really well with that. I would be afraid if they actually plugged in my lighting plot, because I'd be afraid that maybe it would blow up. But
I'm muted, but I'm laughing very hard at that.
so, and I always try to gear it like when I was at Tufts and people were very Hank Azaria was there, Oliver Platt, and there were many people who are you know those names now. I always geared it to what I was doing. So in directing class, when people were doing plays, I did A Boy Like That and One Hand, One Heart from West Side Story because I felt those were play-like. And really, for me, it's not singing out to an audience that which is very presentational and odd, but singing to each other. For the final project, I took Goldoni's Mirandolina and I made it as if it was a ballet. And at that time, it was before I was in Boston Ballet. I went backstage and I looked at how their lighting was and how they had the shin kickers and how they illuminated the body. And so that's why I said, who knows what would have happened because there were a lot of lights there. But that and gels and Fresnels and Licos and it's all that stuff. So the directing was all part of it. It just was part of it. And so so I did them all. I did it hand in hand.
Okay. And then like in your bio, I knew most of the shows, but not all of them. Do you direct things that are not musicals slash dance pieces, like straight plays?
Yes, and I love them. I love them. I mean, I've done operas as well. They usually will have an element of dance, but it'll be the social, and there's all this dialogue that's going on as they're waltzing. Or there is the foxtrot between Eva Braun and Mussolini's mistress while a Nazi soldier is watching. So, and it was really integral in this play. To me, the interesting thing is, and I kind of do a reverse with the dancers. I love working with actors because they are their character. And even though they're frightened when they hear the word like choreographer, and we're going to dance and we're doing Waltz 101, we'll do all of that. And they'll say, okay, now just put that away and you're going to dance as your character. They may be a good dancer. They may be a not so good dancer. They may be sure of themselves. Use it. And they do. And then on the other side, you have the dancers that want to be so perfect about everything. And with Fiddler, I made changes and I call it Dirty Fiddler because I did not want them to look at, and one of the quotes that I love that I've used is that there are no dance schools in Anatevka. So remember that, if you're on the wrong foot, stay on the wrong foot and just make it happen. Don't feel like you have, and sometimes I went around and changed people's footing or directions because I wanted it to look like people are dancing and they're together and it's just messy. And that's what people I think really noticed about it. And particularly before COVID, I got all these offers because they're like, we saw what you did. You made those, I had like 4 dancers and you made all the non-dancers look like they were dancing. They were part of the community. And it's like, yeah, I guess I have that reputation. I can do that, But it's all about being the character and being true to what you're doing.
Well, this makes sense. For some reason I just assumed you were a dancer first and then got into directing later, but this makes total sense that it's with you, from the beginning. Because also I think my favorite directors are ones that can choreograph specifically transitions. Because to me, it's like, how do you get into the show? How do you get between the scenes, the locations? How do you get out of the show? Like that rhythm and that beat, which involves moving people and scenery maybe and all that. But like that choreography to me, it's like if you can do that, because in theory, if you have good performers or actors, they're doing the stuff in the scenes, but then you have to figure out how do we get from scene to scene? And to me, that's like where the true test of is this a good director comes in. Okay, now all of that aside, we can get to the the regular questions. Let's start off with what is a live event that you like to experience as an audience member?
So I like to see theater, and it could be a musical or a straight play with substance that's connected storytelling. I just want to be in that world, taken into that world. That's why I also don't like when people just play out to an audience because I like to be the looking through the keyhole at this. I've used that term a lot. At these people that are in their own world. So that I like, and it can be a musical. There have been many of those, but that's the kind of theater that experience that I like. I like ballets and I love all that stuff. But as far as artwork, Picasso's Guernica. It used to be in the United Nations, and it was about war. And I use that imagery. I use it in Fiddler. I've used it in other things as well about the reaching. And there's just so much in that particular painting. There's just so much to it. There's so many pieces that you can look at, and I think of that also in the theater where you have so many pieces on the stage that you're working with, and I kind of dislike everything done in unison. Or and I mentioned about the presentational thing, but there's just so many pieces, not only that, but the costumes, the lighting, all those different elements that create that montage. And you see that in that painting as well. There's so many pieces that you can focus on.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that one because you look at that and to me it's so abstract that I normally with lighting, I like to things like with a single source of light. And that one, it's sort of like what is the lighting? And like you zoom in on different parts. Anyway, that's just my brain. So like I want to gravitate toward that one because there's so much going on. And I'm like, I need a simpler thing in which Stosh can make all that stuff happen. All right, your financial personality. Are you good, bad, or neutral with money?
I would say neutral. Neutral.
Let's learn about that, why you are neutral. Going back before your career, did you have a good financial example to learn from?
Yeah, my father, the way he made things happen, and even he passed in 2020, but even things that he set up for us along the way, and he didn't want my mother to work, and she was going to stay and raise the four kids, and he did all of that, and yet the way that he was able to position money, save money. There's an aspect of that I have. There's also an aspect that I don't have, but
Okay, and just so you had three siblings, were you raised in New York or where are you from?
no, I'm from north of Boston, Haverhill, Massachusetts. It's 45 miles north of Boston, about 10 minutes from New Hampshire.
Okay, and when did you get to New York?
I spent time at Boston Ballet. I was at Tufts University, and then from there, I stayed in Boston because I was with Boston Ballet. And there was a point where things changed as far as the founder passed away, and then the person taking over stayed for one more year. And then there was a situation with the board, and those boards, I'll tell you, those boards. And she left, and it was time for me to go as well. I went into dancing not knowing that I was going to go into it, but I wanted to dance like Fred Astaire. And the instructor said I had to take ballet. Ballet was the foundation of all dance. It's true, and that's part of the mentoring thing that I tell many of. I say I will tell them, and I told them when I ran the ballet company at the school, I would say take tap and take ballet. Ballet is the technique, and tap will give you the rhythm and the looseness of your ankles and everything. So you're not just a stiff ballet dancer. And I'm not saying all ballet dancers are stiff, but
I'll say it. Yes, they are.
uh,
Kidding.
yeah, those that have done other forms of dance aren't. I mean, I also at age 11 did folk dancing, so I had that aspect of it. And I will tell these dancers, take a comedy improv class. You might be horrible in it, but it'll take you out of your shell, and you will, just be able. You'll have that.
So did you come to New York to work or how'd you make that jump?
I had a friend who's now on his 15th Broadway show, and he was like, just come, just come. Boston Ballet had performed for, I believe it was 3 weeks at the Uris Theater. It's now the Gershwin where Wicked is, with Rudolph Nureyev. And at that time, I went to see Broadway shows and was like, yeah, this is what I really want to do. But I said to my friend, he said, just come, start auditioning. And I said, I need more jazz classes. I need more voice lessons, all that. No, just come, just come. And my fifth audition, I got into American Dance Machine, the original Anybody's from West Side Story, Lee Theodore, saw, she wanted to see everything I could do. This is where I say about that diversity. She wanted to see me do Ray Bolger style clogging. And then she wanted to see my ballet. And then at the very ending of the audition callback, and she was only looking for two men at that time, she went by and had everyone, let me hear your voice. Everyone saying happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday. She got to me, she goes, in Polish. And so I said, do you want me to translate the American happy birthday, or do you want me to do the Polish one? Whichever. And so I did that. And then she said, okay, improvise something of Polish dance. And I did. And then she saw that this was a person that could adapt and do all those different styles. So that was me. I gave myself 2 years. Like, okay, if I don't get my equity card in 2 years, I'll leave. And I'll go back to Boston. But it happened rather quickly.
Okay. So you moved and then just started auditioning.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. So at the start of your career, what did your finances look like?
Well, they were in flux because my father started me by, making sure at college that I had a bank account and I balanced the checks and all that kind of thing. I got into Boston Ballet my second semester senior year. I had to leave and come back and finish. So I was kind of not in to begin with, but all of a sudden, some money was coming in. Oh, that's kind of great and cool and all that. That's where someone also always has to be careful about, just because money's coming in doesn't mean you need to spend it. We were in all these great countries. We were in Italy and in England and France and Belgium and Mexico, all these great places. And you're like, oh, I like that. Let me buy that. I can buy it. I have money. It was getting better during that ballet time because money was coming in and I was able to have a bank account that was growing. And so that's when it was there.
Amazing. All right. Noted. If you're making money and you don't have to spend it, just a reminder that you don't have to spend it.
Maybe that's why I did it, but because my father was very frugal about vacations, about, all those extras and all that, and put his family in a very good place.
So you're saying you picked up some of that?
I picked up some of that. I'm frugal to a degree.
Okay. So today, do you worry or think about money on a daily basis?
Almost. It's not daily, but, there's a lot of thoughts about money.
All right. Do you have any debts like student loans or medical debt or credit card debt?
Nothing except medical. And that's I'm gonna throw in another little thing is all that saving is for that rainy day or that unexpected thing that happens. And I had a rather unexpected, life-threatening situation. And so I wasn't exactly ready for that. So there was that. As far as credit card, my father detested credit cards, and I have at Actors Federal Credit Union, it is only $1,000. I can't, and I don't change it. I've tried, like when I'd be abroad, like, oh, please let me just change it, and it'd be all this like stuff you have to go through, and it's just like, you know what, now let's just leave it at that. So, so it kind of keeps you within that limit, then pay it off and all that. Don't get into that credit card tunnel of as many people do. So yeah, I'm not a big, I use it on occasion because I have to. And particularly if I'm going somewhere, abroad or whatever, it's nice to have a couple of forms, just in case one doesn't work or whatever. But I keep it at a limit.
Wow, I love that. That's I just love that because I feel like credit cards are a way of life. And the fact that you keep yours so strict is just a wonderful thing because that has come up so many times on the show where people have these big credit card, it carries over month to month to month for years and years and years. So I think that's a good thing that you got from your father to be wary of
Yeah,
that.
no, he warned me about that long time ago. So
Also, I don't want to pry into your medical situation, but could we talk about that? What happened at what point in your life and how, I guess, how the financial part worked? Like, did you have health insurance, etc.?
did have health insurance, yes. And that was a whole other thing, and we probably won't go into all of that, but it started health insurance through Actors Equity. But then when I was no longer working with Actors Equity, I wasn't getting that. SDC gives you something to a degree depending on how much you make. SAG does as well. So there'd be times that I would be working a lot with those that I would get something, but I ended up having through Cobra my health insurance, which was a godsend. I mean, really, because could grumble about all those payments, particularly under Cobra, but when this came along, it came with basically little warning. Within 24 hours, a cancerous mass grew to 23 centimeters, which is pretty much unheard of. And so, yeah. So, anyways, that's the Reader's Digest version. It took a long time. I had recovery to do, not only with the cancer, but then later on with physical therapy and all that.
Got it. When you were talking about the health insurance, was that just for this situation or was that through your career? Like, were you using one singular health insurance for this, or were you using it from all the unions?
This one was not from all the unions because those have been fleeting. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I remember when I would be on Cobra that kept on getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden it's like, and you can't do any more Cobra. That's it for you. I have a feeling you can still stay on Cobra with equity, but at that time with me it didn't. And it was nice because after those tours of Fiddler, I'd accumulated so much that it did linger for like 2 more years after the production was done. The business is not always so easy, that it can give you that health insurance. I mean, you have to do a lot of work, and it has to be consistent. And COVID didn't help. And just coming off of COVID, where I'd lost a lot of work because of COVID, then this happened in 2023. So I had to lose some work for that too. But here I am.
Here you are. Um,
In a week after the last radiation, I was off to Phoenix Theater, directing and choreographing a Fiddler, and it was very special to me.
yeah.
So,
Well, I remember I saw that you were going to be in Fit. I think I was living in Phoenix for a year, and I think I left like right before you got there or something
you
like
did
that.
invite me to something like the day I got there, and I was like, "Hey, enough that I'm here."
Yeah. All right. Have you ever used a budget?
I have. I'm not good with it, and I stray from it, but I have, and there definitely is a line of what I know is going to go out, and the unforeseen stuff I don't quite know. But yeah, yeah, I do, but I do stray from it.
Okay. And have you used it like not consistently, but like have there been times where you're using it and sticking to it, or has it just been like a general your whole life it's just sort of always been there and you've sort of managed it?
I stick to it when I'm in a out of town situation. I try to be very conscious about that. But looming over that are the responsibilities that I have here to continue to pay. So there's that, but then that's why I also have to be really meticulous about it when I'm out on the road.
What is a good financial thing that you have done that other people listening could learn from?
I'm glad I did all of those fiddlers, particularly the production contract fiddlers. I don't know. This I think is another answer to a different question, but because that really was great for me and the 401k and all that, that I was able to develop from that. And Yiddish Fiddler, not so much when it began, it was under an antic contract and all that, but as the royalties came along, it was like, oh, okay, well, it's like you spoke about earlier about the extensions. There's a little bit of that play that, okay, well, if we say we're going to be here until, September, then people will buy the tickets and then we could extend it again. And we had a lot of that happening with Fiddler. It just kept on extending. But that was a surprise for me because I really didn't think I thought it was going to be, 3 weeks of rehearsal and then 2 weeks of performance, possibly, extension 3, and it just kept on going.
Okay, so I was thinking, I heard that a good thing that you did was do union contracts.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, the union contracts really were important. It was a built-in, it saved you with a built-in structure of the rules, like per diem, like accommodations and all that. And I don't know how some of these other tours can do it. The non-union tours. I just don't know how those. I guess they don't have many roots or a life, or I'm not saying that they don't have a life, but then I just don't know. But the union contracts really were helpful, and I first realized that when I was with Boston Ballet and I was on the AGMA contract and we were in Italy and we called it Trauma Tour because everything that could possibly go wrong went. Like we arrived in our first city and found out, oh, the theater blew away in a tornado. We're going to move you next day to another city because I mean, torrential monsoon, rains and things like that. Because of the rules, there were many things that were built in, like, oh, you need to make up for that performance, but that should be your day off and all those things. And it was like ka-ching, ka-ching. And it was a surprise to me because I was used to, community theater and you did it because you loved it and all that. And it's like, oh, okay, there's a business behind show business. And you really have to, look at that. And that definitely the union contracts. And then manager, now in recent years, as of the last Yiddish Fiddler, I took on a manager. Prior to that, when we transferred, I had an entertainment lawyer who didn't really find you the work, but he did represent you to a degree. The entertainment lawyer aspect of it was interesting.
Yeah, and I just reiterate that point. I think that's good for like young people. Is what I always say. It's like just join a union at some point because it's all that built-in stuff. Then you don't have to worry about like yes, you have to manage your finances, but if you're going to be in this for the long haul, if you're going to do this as a career, get a union, like start working as much union work. Like, because I know with Actors Equity, it used to be at least a lot of people would be like, well, I don't know if I want to join because then I won't be able to do XYZ. And my thought is like, just join up because then you're going to start getting the benefits of healthcare and pension, etc.
Yeah, it does give you a foundation, not only for the work at hand, but to build, your life along the way. And also the wonderful programs. I mean, actors, this is something that I don't think they've been doing since COVID. The Commercial Theater Institute, producers pay a lot of money to go off and do the long thing, but the long workshop. But Actors Equity for a long period of time, I think twice a year or maybe 4 times a year, we do a single day seminar. It would be from morning to 5 o'clock, I think 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock. They would do a different aspect of theater. So they would do commercial theater or one woman show or off Broadway, not only talking about the process, but they would give us a spreadsheet and they wouldn't say, it was from a production, but that was all erased, so we didn't know what production it was from. So we could see, how that all worked. And in talking now with producers and in fact sometimes helping them where cuts could be made and still have the integrity of the production, but you're going to make these little cuts and it'll save you some money. When I talk about dealing with and talking with designers and being able to speak their language, sort of, but the same thing. I think they're very appreciative when you get it. It's not all about, oh, the artistry in this and I must have this. And it's like, well, we can't afford this, to be able to work around that and to come up with ideas and solutions. And because it's everyone. It's everyone.
All right. So what I heard was if you ever get a chance to take like a single day, this is how you produce theater, do it.
Yeah.
All right. What is a bad financial thing that you've done that maybe you regret and that other people can learn not to do?
I think I touched upon that earlier, but it is spending money when you have money. I did put myself on this rigorous exercise, I guess. When I was on tour, I would go, antiquing. I'd go to different stores and I'd see things, and I would take a picture of them or I would write them down, and I would then revisit them after I got paid on Thursday, and then make a decision if it was something I really wanted or needed, or what could that one thing be if I was getting something.
So that was like the revisiting was to help you not get it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was not to impulsively buy, because it was just so easy. I mean, hey, there was money, and I could save even from my per diem, and just see it, buy it, whatever. I like it, buy it. But try to do that. But I did enough of buying things that I shouldn't have. So I wish I was a little bit more stringent.
I got you. Yeah, my wife and I, we've never been impulsive purchasers. Like food and travel, those are things where we overspend. But day-to-day impulse, etc., or even lifestyle impulse, not really. But now that I have a toddler, it's like I want that little bike for him, or like, little things. And I've only done, he's like two and a half almost, and I've only purchased like three non-necessary things for him, like toys. But a couple of them I do regret because I'm like, he has 1,000 toys. He did not need the Mr. Potato Head.
It's an easy thing to get into, and so really, watch yourself. Just watch yourself, because yeah, that's something that I could have saved more.
Yeah. Um, have you negotiating pay for yourself? Have you ever talked about it with anybody else, like somebody else on the production, like an assistant choreographer or anything like that? Do you ever talk with other people when you're negotiating your pay?
I try to stay away from that. I know designers do favored nations a lot, which is important for them. I kind of don't fit in that. And I do request to have an assistant, and that probably also takes away from my money. Let's just put it that way, because they go, oh, as an assistant, then we'll give him. And I urge them to ask for what you want, but I kind of I don't negotiate for them. I can speak on their behalf or get them in and then figure out ways, like I've had an associate who is also in the show and the dance captain, so there's money that is accumulated, from doing that. I mean, it's a lot of work, but there's, that, and I do request for someone to be there and really say this is the person I have to have. But yeah, the other end of it, negotiating for them, I don't do. In recent years, I have the manager that kind of does me, and that's sometimes difficult. And despite the great thing about unions is at least you can stay at the minimum. The bad thing with some producers now is they only want to stay at the minimum. But he has been able to negotiate, bumps up in the fee, which is great. And there are other times it's like, no, can't.
Yeah. Yeah. Connected to that, how do you find work? Like, how do you get your jobs?
Well, there used to be, backstage and the unions to do all the dancing things, and sometimes it's being recommended. It's networking. It's getting just that call, or doing a little bit of a search. You see that, oh, someone's doing this, and then now at least I can like stick my manager on them and say, okay, can I'd really like to do this, and I've done this before, or I know this show, and so I'm able to do that aspect of it. The union doesn't find work for you. It enables you to work with it in those contracts. STC doesn't find work for us, and nor does Actors Equity. But you have to actually show up and do the auditions. But the networking and knowing people, along the way, your name comes up, and miraculously it comes up.
Yeah. Um, do you have an entity, a corporation, LLC, anything like that, or are you just a sole proprietor?
I'm just a sole proprietor. I'm just going to jump to the one thing that I had mentioned with my entertainment lawyer. During COVID, he had suggested that I write everything down and take all of my notes and give them to have a copyright on my work, which is an important thing. It doesn't always happen, but it's really an important thing.
For every show, like do that on every show or a specific project?
I only did that for Yiddish Fiddler because there were so many things that were new that I did to them that I didn't want it to be thought that's Robbins, and oh, we can just do that or on our, and there's plenty of people that think that in many situations. I have other shows before I became STC that they think, oh yeah, we can just reproduce that from the videotape, and we don't have to pay you. It's ours. We paid for it already. So it's an important thing, particularly if it's something of that importance. Now other shows like Broadway shows are there are the archive videos and things like that that probably could suffice with that, but in this particular one he suggested that.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, like with a lighting designer, it's like, well, actually, with so much of this, it's like it has to be of a certain scale in order for this to matter. So anyway, it's not an issue I've ever had to deal with. And it's like if anybody was going to rip off my cues, it's like, what am I going to do? Even if I write it all down, because I automatically have all the lighting paperwork already.
Yeah, it is hard. I mean, it's intellectual property, and I guess that's the way we work with that. And anyway.
Yeah. So as a sole proprietor, the income that you're getting on your contracts, is that W-2 or is that 1099 mostly?
Mostly 1099. I have had on occasion when something advances to the next step in the contract, I ask, can I be an employee on W-2? Sometimes I get a no, and other times I get yes. And I think that balance is very important. There was the time that you only wanted to have those W-2s because they helped you on taxes, and I have plenty of deductions that I can use them on the 1099s. But it's nice to have the balance, but it's nice, I think it's kind of gone the other way now. Like you really need to try to get those W-2s.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because I feel like I'm one of the few people that I'm like, give me all the W-2s in the world. Like, I don't care about the deductions. I don't care about that. Like, if everything was W-2 in my world, I'd be so happy because it's just like easy to file away these taxes.
And when I did the film work, that was great because that stuff was on W-2. So at least I had a balance, enough of a balance. So if the 1099 showed up, which it does on many things.
Yeah. Do you file quarterly taxes?
I wouldn't say quarterly. I would do, about 3 times a year.
Okay. And then do you file your own taxes?
I do, but I have them prepared through VITA, through Actors Equity and Screen Actors Guild have VITA, which has been like I've done that forever, and it's so great because they know, and that work form. I mean, that I definitely pass on to even my non-equity friends. That work form, like, look at it, look at what you can, use.
Yes. Okay, I love that. And I'm going to pull up the link for that because we've done a tax episode. There's different people that have VITA intake forms, but it's like if you don't know how to do taxes, it's like just look at that form because it explains everything away.
Yeah, SAC has a better one than Equity does, even though it's more equity focused. The organization SAC has a better,
Form.
work the website and how you navigate it.
Yes, I'm gonna link it in the show notes if anybody's curious about that. And so I've never done that. Do you actually go into a person or is it all like digital remote?
No, no, you go to a person, and it was a little hairy during COVID, but you fill out the work forms and you bring them, and they move it around and make their magic, and then they explain it to you too, which is really good. And they'll say, "Yeah, you made a little too much money on this, or this, and you really shouldn't have had some." So at least you have some sort of understanding, and hopefully you can do better the next time.
And do you fill this all out on paper and then do you go submit your taxes like a paper copy?
No, I fill the work forms on paper, and they do it online and file it right then and there.
Got it. So when you go in for your meeting, as long as you have all your stuff, they just finish it and you are done.
Yeah, you're done.
Awesome. I love it. Okay. Um, do you have a retirement plan? And with four unions, this could be interesting. But what does your retirement look like?
Some of it I'm going to have to look into a little bit more, but I do have pensions on three of them. I don't believe I do on the one that I'm honorable with for all. We wouldn't do anything with that. I have a 401k, and then I have IRA, and CDs, and that's kind of where I am. CDs are really important too. I mean, I really 401k and CDs. I think that that's really important for younger people, making sure that they manage their money and then can't touch it for a while.
No, I think that's a good point to make is that you can't touch it for a while. That's very important because I always talk about Roth IRA. That's the thing I'm always like, do this. And then 401k too. It's like any retirement account, like set money aside for yourself. And the reason to put it in the retirement accounts is one, yes, there's tax incentives to do so, but two, it forces you to not touch it, which is really what you need. And when you said 401k, is that your own 401k or is it through one of those unions?
It was through Actors Equity, and I no longer have an employer that puts in as well. I have to, put in myself.
Okay, so you have it through equity and then you just put money in throughout the year for yourself. Brilliant. Awesome. And then IRA, that's your own, I'm sure. And the CDs. Okay, so we had Isabella Bird, a lighting designer, on recently, and she was talking about CDs because I grew up in an age where CDs gave you 1% interest, maybe two if you were lucky. And it wasn't until the last like 3 years where the interest has gone up.
It has.
Yeah, because like pre 9/11, that was the last time it was like high. So I'm so glad that you're saying it. When you say CDs, certificates of deposits, you just mean that the savings that you have in your bank account, you're putting into CDs.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I love that. I think probably I know the answer to this, but outside of all that retirement stuff, do you invest in anything?
No, no, not really.
I mean, that sounds like plenty, but I just asking. And then do you give to charity at all, or do you give back to the universe in any way?
Yes, Broadway Cares has always been for me very close. When I was on tour, we raised money. We had the Oi of Cooking cookbook for Fiddler, and I was on those and continue to do that with different organizations here in the city. So there's that aspect, yes, and then I guess giving to the universe would be more like the mentoring that and really trying to get that next generation, who may be a little lost. Like I just did a production in Cleveland, and I told everyone, here's my card. You know how to get in touch with me. If you come to the city, let me know. If I can't meet with you, we can talk on the phone, but we'll meet for coffee and I'll help you. I mean, I used to, here's where you get, let's get a backstage. Let's look at back. I mean, now you can do it all online, but to kind of give them those ideas and take them on a little bit of a tour of different places of where to go for auditions and all that. But yeah.
I love that because that's also the answer that Isabella gave. So you both said CDs and you both said mentoring. I love it. All right, this is a new section I've added if you're comfortable with it. If not, no big deal. But what is the actual fee that you got on a recent project?
Okay. And this, I could not get them to budge at all. My manager could not get them to budge. $11,736 for a month.
You said for a month?
Yeah. I was coming back from the illness and everything, so I was open to take it, but yeah, yeah, it wasn't exactly the situation.
Yeah. And was that out of town? So like you had to go somewhere for a month?
It was out of town. No per diem, but they gave you a lovely apartment, and that's kind of now what they do. They don't give you per diem if they give you an apartment and you could have a kitchen and make your own, food. So yeah, that's where budgeting comes in because you got a budget out of that money that you're getting, for your food.
I'm so glad you said that about per diem because everybody I feel like is always like, oh yeah, you get per diem when you go out of town. And I'm like, sometimes, but more often than not, I don't.
Yeah, that it was interesting too. I mean, they took care of the plane, they took care of the accommodations, to and from the airport was taken care of. They did give a car, but you had to pay your own gas. That you could do, and it was in walking distance. It was like 4 New York blocks. I mean, you didn't need a car. My manager had asked because I was being flown out and put up for auditions. They put me up in a hotel at that time, but there was no per diem. There was no fee, to do the auditions. That was considered part of my whole thing. But I'm out of town for those 3 days. It's like, so to me that, yeah, doesn't, not so good.
Yeah, yeah, that's a rough one because I would have been like, I will zoom in for those auditions. I don't know if that's realistic, but it's like, oh yeah, that's a bummer that you had to go out for auditions without a fee. Hmm. Interesting. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that, Stash. I appreciate that. So I'm heading to wrap up, but there's just a couple other things that I want to talk about that are unrelated to finance or career or anything. But I noticed that you worked on a production of Me and My Girl. What, just because I did that at a summer stock, the Forestburg Playhouse. I did that show there, and it's like an old-fashioned, quirky show that I don't know will ever get done again. Even though I did some Googling, and it came out in 1937. So we're getting around to its 100th year anniversary. So surely someone's going to do a big production in 10 years. But anyway, what did you do on that show? And where did you do it?
I did that at Gateway Playhouse and Candlewood Playhouse. And it fell into my lap because I was in a production there of and gave them my resume and everything, saying I'd love to work here as a choreographer or whatever. I was doing Brigadoon and I was a dance captain, and we were already open, and they said, "Oh, our choreographer dropped out. Can you do it?" Praising me. I did like everything. People said I was like the Walking Dead. And so I did it there. And then they decided to make it a non-union tour. And so I reproduced that, and it was with a different director. So I was a co-director and choreographer on it. So, and it was done on Broadway with Robert Lindsay back in like I think the 90s or something. And it's kind of quirky and fun and funny. And now when I look at it, it's not really the kind of thing that I like to do now, but maybe I would do it under a different prism, a little less presentational and or maybe even heighten the music hall feel of it.
Well, okay, so what I love about the show or what I remember of it is that there's this song, Leaning on a Lamppost, where the person dances with the lamppost. And so when I was looking it up, it turns out that wasn't in the original, and they put that into the West End version in 1985, which then transferred to Broadway.
Yeah, I'm guessing when they did the revival, they probably pulled other things, other music from the period.
So the writer was Noel Gay. That was like a big hit song. It got to number nine, I think, on the top 100 or something. So that was like a big song from the 1930s for a different film. And so when they did the revival, they're like, let's take that big hit song and put it into this.
Oh, that's a great song. I love doing that number as well. I mean, I have other people that dance as well, and they come in, they disappear, and then they kind of cross through and just leave him there with his lamppost.
Everyone's like, why are we talking about this? But I just love it when there's these shows that don't get produced very often. And I meet other people that have done them. I'm like, yeah, let's talk about it. And speaking of, Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. So that was a show I avoided my whole life because I was raised in a very pious way, and I fit in line. I didn't step out, so I avoided it. But I recently saw it a few months ago because somebody I knew was directing it and stage managing it, and oh my gosh, what a funny, quirky show! But you did that show, and can you tell us about that?
I did it in Ireland, no less, and I not only did I did the choreography for that and musical staging, but I also worked on the dialect, because they didn't have anyone there to do that. They didn't want to say the word whorehouse, so they would say best little chicken ranch, and or they would kind of avoid it. They would put me like on the radio and everything because I had no qualms doing that. And it was so much fun doing it there. It was the Irish premiere of it, a very American musical, because I did that Appalachian clogging and all that fun stuff. I think it's a, it's a really sweet musical. I think I mean, some wonderful music in it, and I wish it was done more. I mean, it just there's a lot to it. My favorite part is Dotsy May. It's one of those character songs that everything about that person's life is in that song. And there's only like three songs that I know of that are like that.
No, I agree. I think it's such a sweet musical. And I was blown away just because I didn't know. I did listen to the music a little bit ahead of time. And I was like, I don't know. But I was on Spotify and I don't pay for Spotify. So it was all jumbled in the order. So I didn't really know what order the show was going in. And I was like, I don't know about this show. And then I saw it and I was like, it's such like there's a couple quirky songs that I could do without maybe. But overall, I'm like, I would go see this show anytime. Anytime I see it being produced now, I'm gonna be like, I want to go. And I just love that you did it in Ireland because it is so American.
It's so American. But like for that Appalachian clogging, I had people who did Irish step dance. So, they could do it. We had closed rehearsals because they had to take off their shirts in it because they're changing from football uniforms into, to go to the chicken ranch. And they were all like so prim and like so worried about doing it. So we had closed rehearsals, and then finally we invited the women in the show to watch it, and they went like berserk. It was like, they're watching Full Monty or something like that. That was the audience's response as well. They just went berserk.
I love it. That's awesome. Okay, so now two questions to wrap it up. Regarding finances, what advice would you give somebody who's starting out their career now, and specifically somebody who's starting as a dancer slash director slash choreographer, somebody like you?
Take the work wherever you can find it, and keep your nose clean, and build up your resume, but your networking, and your contacts, because from that things will blossom, and it happens. It's like you don't know how it happens, but it happens.
I love that. I think that's succinct and perfect and logical. Um, I do want to ask about, you said you now have a manager. Is that like an agent? Is that the same difference?
Yeah, it's almost like an agent. I think an agent hawks you more. The manager builds relationships or has relationships that then he tries to include you in. So they're almost the same.
Okay. And you said you had a lawyer before that. So were you just going through life and then when it was dealing with contracts, you would have a lawyer look at it?
Well, when we got to the point of Yiddish Fiddler transferring, it was so successful, and then it was transferring to stage 42. I needed to have some more protection and some more leverage and all that. Although it helped to a degree, but it was and that person came recommended and was very helpful for that. But I really needed also someone that was going to help me get work.
How did you get to the manager? Was that just somebody also that was recommended?
A friend of mine who coaxed me into coming to New York is his manager. He had suggested a couple of people, and one of them she told me flat out that I'm not marketable because I'm an old white guy.
I am laughing uncomfortably, but also, hey, it is what it is.
It was after COVID, Me Too, and all things started happening or whatever. But I was like, oh, okay. And I said, and not for Fiddler even, which I'm like, and she just was like, yeah, no, in a few years you can get in touch with me again.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and we'll see if we keep that in. I don't know, but
I know, it's a little.
yeah, it's a little. But I mean, it was also said to you, and it is real, and and also from the manager perspective, I mean, if it's going to be their job to get you work, and if they think whatever their style is, they're not going to be able to do it, it's a reality of.
It was a cruel reality to hear it in that way, but
But you got a different manager, and everything's working out.
yeah, everything's good. Yeah.
Okay, last question here. Where can people connect with you, and who do you want to connect with you?
StaśKmieć.com is my website. StaskMiec.com. Or my manager, Nyle, Nyle Brenner, Brenner. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and you can find me there. And who? Producers, artistic directors. I have plenty of shows that are in development, and we're hoping that those are going to go forward. And there's good vibes on some of them. So artistic directors and composers and writers. I've gone to so many different readings because that's the way also sometimes you get attached to a project. It's nicer to get attached to it for their staged reading or something like that, because then you're there already in the game. But yeah, those are particularly the people that I'm interested in.
Amazing. I love it. And how do you get invited to the read-throughs? Do you keep your eye out for it, or is it people that are saying, "Hey, come to this reading"?
There's certain ones I keep my eye for and I ask about being invited, and that's a little bit more difficult. But there are other ones that friends of mine who are producers will say like, "Hey, I was invited to this, and could you come?" Or I've been invited by plenty of producer friends who say, "I'm a part of this, and I'd like you to come and help me, like give me your opinion." I have to be a little bit more careful about that because I've been giving away a lot of opinions without being involved in the project. So
Yep, I understand. Okay. All right. Well, Stash, thank you for doing this. And I just want to say something I love about you and that came across today as well is that you are a hustler, baby. Like you hustle, man.
I'll tell you, that's how I got that Yiddish Fiddler. Zalman said, "You were persistent. You kept on calling when we weren't calling you back and saying like, okay, well, what's going on? I haven't heard from you." And like, okay, we still don't know yet. We still don't know yet. And so,
Yep, I stand by that. You're obsessed about Fiddler.
yeah.
Okay. All right, Stash, thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thank you very much, Ethan. Take care.
That's it for this week's episode. We went a little bit longer than usual, so I won't wax on with too many thoughts, but my takeaways are mentorship. That is a beautiful thing about our industry. There is no straight career ladder, but because of that, a lot of people want to help mentor and show others how the business runs. Also, Stash had a friend who said, just come to New York. And that's important, having a network and colleagues and collaborators that will encourage you to do such a crazy thing. Because what if Stash had never left Boston? Like, I'm sure his life would have been great, but it wouldn't have been the Staś that we know. He also mentioned that mentorship can open doors, but you have to be the one to wow and impress. So if there's any of my students who are listening, which I know there are not, but remember, your teachers can introduce you to things and to people, but you have to be the one to pursue those things. Not spending money while on tour. Just a good thing. Just because you can spend the money doesn't mean you have to. The $1,000 credit card limit, I think that is amazing and fantastic. The fact that he has tried to up that limit, but then has decided, you know what, let's not. Or let me just work with the struggle of having that limit. Having heard so many horror stories about credit cards from this show, I just gotta say, good for you, Staś. At the end, Staś mentioned that he got the Yiddish fiddler gig by being persistent. That is a fantastic point because nobody else is out there getting you the work. He mentioned a manager now, but they really aren't getting him work. He is attending the readings, asking people for work, looking around to see what companies are doing what. So that's just your reminder that you have to be a hustler. And a side note on this, I have been catching up on the Light Talk podcast. They had a recent episode with Jeff Nellis, who is a lighting designer for huge corporate events. Now, half the episode, they talk about working in the Sphere, that giant LED ball in Las Vegas, and that is fascinating on its own. But at the end of the episode, Jeff talks about tenacity being a core value needed for anybody in our industry, and he stressed that a lot of people will stop pursuing their goals, and if you do pursue your goals, you are bound to achieve them. So if you want something like working on Broadway or working on a TV show, go pursue that thing. Staś did it from the very beginning, like when he just moved to New York and just started auditioning. All right, I have linked that Light Talk episode in the show notes. And again, you can find that with links to everything we've discussed at artisticfinance.com/197. Thank you, Staś, for giving me all that time. And thank you, dear listener, for spending this hour and a half with us. I'm truly honored that you choose to take this time and be here. Now, if you are a patron of the show, thank you for your support and know that I love you. If you're not a patron but you want to become one, please do so at patreon.com/artisticfinance. Now, if you aren't a patron because you don't want to part ways with your money, I absolutely understand. If you are looking for a way to show support for these interviews and keep them happening, there are no-cost ways to do so, and that is by subscribing to our YouTube channel, leaving a rating review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or the easiest way, by merely continuing to listen to the show. And if you're feeling really wild, you could make sure you're following on your podcast app and have auto downloads enabled. But that's only if you're feeling wild. But whether or not you do any of that is totally up to you, no pressure. But what is important as we wrap up here is that you know that while maybe we've never met, or maybe we have met, but either way, let me make sure that you know you are a wonderful human being. I love you, and the world is a better place because you are here. That's it for today. Until next week, break a leg.
Thank you for listening to Artistic Finance, where we interview successful artists, leaders, and investors to help educate and inspire the creative community. To access our show notes and resources, go to artisticfinance.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any decision, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Artistic Finance. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.